Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to Business as a Magical Practice. I have a very, very, very special guest on with me, Lettie Sullivan, and she is someone that I hired to take my entire team through some, what is the word you actually use? Somatic abolitionism. We're going to get deep into this and explain what that means, but uh, I'm going to give an introduction to Lettie in case, and I've mentioned her in past podcasts too, but I'm going to give you a little introduction to Lettie. She's going to say hi and also then lead us through a prayer, and then we're just going to jump right in. Sorry, Lettie, do you want to say hi?
No, I'm excited to be here, Sam. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, so excited for you to be here. So Lettie Sullivan is a priestess in the 13 Moon Lineage and the Creatrix of the Goddess Ministry, an organization whose mission is to help anchor spiritual practices centered in the divine feminine archetypes, metaphysical principles, and cosmic time cycles. Lettie is also an inspirational speaker, a professional organizer, a life coach, an author, and a mother of three. Woohoo! Such an awesome depth and breadth of experience, Lettie.
Yeah. Life will take you through it. Many curriculums.
Yeah. So let's start with a prayer, and maybe you can give a little explanation of like why we pray and the power of it even.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, prayer, in a lot of ways, prayer has been so degraded in its potency because many of us were taught to pray by rote. We were taught to say the exact same words that people were saying thousands of years ago in cultures that we've never had any contact with, prayers that were spoken in languages that were translated from languages that didn't actually have some of the same common words in the languages that they were translated into. And so and then people that superficially use the word prayer but don't actually use it, like, oh, my thoughts and prayers are with you, but that person is not actually praying, they just kind of said that thing. Right, so that can leave so many people with a sense of prayer, like, what is that anyway? So I was trained as a prayer practitioner with the Centers for Spiritual Living, and they teach a 5-step affirmative prayer process. And those 5 steps are, first of all, coming into the prayer with an intention, even if, like, what I'm going to do is going to be a simple invocation for our time together. But you recognize that you're centered in the present moment. You activate gratitude. You remember that you are centered in a field of infinite possibilities, that we are connected by this basic ground of beingness that we all share, not just as humanity, but everything that arises in reality is connected. Everything is inside of everything else. Right? And so you recognize, you unify with that divine field that we are all a part of. And then you begin to consciously hold and speak into the what you're calling in, what you're focalizing, what you're recognizing, whom you're recognizing, if it's a prayer directed to a person. And after you do that, then you give thanks and gratitude, and then you release the prayer, and then you call it complete, you call it done, right? So that is the basic grounding of the affirmative prayer process. So let's take a deep breath. I invite you to put your hand over your heart. Breathe in. And as we drop down into the stillness, we connect to the presence, this present moment that is absolutely timeless, that we are no longer in the past or the future, that we're in this timelessness of the now moment. that truly all of the magnificence, all of the intelligence, the wisdom, the grace, the power, the love, it's all centered right here and right now. So in this moment, we are collectively bringing ourselves into the seat of our individual awareness and the one that we all share. And so it's from this place of unity and oneness that I speak this word of blessing on our conversation, that we come with our hearts, our minds wide open to receive wisdom, knowledge, clarity, that which our souls are asking and seeking for right now. That there is something that is emerging from this space that my dear sister Sam is holding. And so we send our gratitude, our love for Sam for holding the sacred space, for being someone who is committed to the wisdom and the guidance of how we speak, how we communicate, how we move through the offerings that we bring to the world, how we communicate those, how we learn and build and share with one another. And so I bless this process. I bless our conversation. I surrender into it and I let it be with so much love and gratitude. And so it is. Ashe.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
I hope everyone feels as good as I do right now. So you call yourself a somatic abolitionist. Can you tell us what that even means?
I learned that phrase from Dr. Resma Menakem, who is the author of My Grandmother's Hands. And he is a somatic therapist, trauma informed has a therapeutic practice, and his book guides us through um, how trauma, especially racialized trauma, occurs in the body, how it accumulates, how it's released, and what it takes to be in full responsibility for, what's showing up within us, and how we address that, and how we address our own wounds before we even put ourselves out there for others. There is a liberation for each of us internally that only we can provide for ourselves, because um, when there is racial trauma in whatever form, microaggressions, just old patterns, macroaggressions, and violence and things like that, it leaves an imprint on us. And sometimes we're carrying around these imprints that aren't even ours. They weren't things that even happened to us directly, but they were things that may have happened to our caregivers and our parents and our ancestors, that gets passed down through socialization. But we're also now finding that it gets passed down epigenetically, right? And it's part of our human design to learn from the past, right? It's a very simple thing, but when it comes to trauma, you can be carrying around so much heaviness that is not even yours. And so somatic abolitionist is, how do we abolish the systemic oppression that we're carrying around that may have been bequeathed to us by our ancestors?
Mm. And so I originally reached out to you and sought you out because we had a client who had was launching a program that was very social justice focused, or not even focused. It was like woven into the design of the program is social justice work. And we were writing copy and create for the sales page for this program. And the client was just like, you know what, this isn't sensitive enough. I feel like you don't know this topic enough to really write on it. And it was a big like, ooh, that's not okay to hear. That is not okay to hear. And I found it incredibly upsetting. Obviously, it was such an event that felt like a slap in the face to wake up to not doing enough work, haven't done enough work. And the fact that, and we talked a lot about this, Lettie, is like, as a marketing agency, or I definitely identify, like, I consider myself a marketer, and I got into marketing because it was, I saw these like major corporations like Monsanto and all these places that spending billions on marketing, and it doesn't make marketing bad. It's a tool, just like money, that we all need, especially people who are good-hearted and want to see a change in the world. And I was like, wow, I haven't done my part. So I started like researching out there of like, okay, what sort of training could I get me and my team around using like anti-racism in marketing? Like, how do we actually, like, what sort of training is this? And there's like zero. Or for huge corporations that like teams of, I started like reaching out to, there was like 3 options that I reached out to, and they're like, no, we only work with people who have like 1,000 employees minimum. And I was like, oh wait, we have 3. So grateful to find you and work with you, and you put together this incredible program, and really I feel like ignited a journey in us, and what I'm like starting to consider decolonized marketing. And I'd love to hear like your thoughts on that.
Well, yes. I mean, there's been quite a journey with the diversity, equity, and inclusion training programs that pop up in corporate America and in the private sector. There are so many anti-racist educators out there. There are some really wonderful books. There are powerful scholars in the mainstream that you can point to and really access their wisdom and their medicine. And for me, I took that journey. I took the DEI courses. I sat as chairman of diversity committees and all these different things. And but for me, I have been in an active process of decolonizing myself. First, I had to do it because um, there are so many ways that we as individuals, regardless of how you're presenting race, gender, orientation, or whatever, um, we are socialized in this culture, in in our society. And so many of us probably, your listeners are in the West, and I know there's some all over the world, but mostly in the Western world, we're socialized in a very masculine centered way, and that our communications and the ways that we are being with each other um, are all very much from a socialization that tends to be very aggressive. Aggressive marketing tactics, aggressive, even, and people that are seeking relief from systemic oppression. There are sometimes anti-racist educators and DEI people that are um, in a place where their words and their techniques and their wisdom are seen as separative. And this is something that people that are fighting for the status quo use as a cudgel, use to kind of try to break up the unity of the movement, right? Because, like I said, equality feels like oppression for people who are given unearned advantage. Right? So if you have all of this unearned privilege, then equality is going to feel like oppression, and so there's some tremendous pushback going on. And so for me, I had to ask the question, what feels right and true for me now? And that's where, Dr. Menachem's work was such a godsend for me after the murder of George Floyd. And I was trying to figure out what to do, and no tools that I had at my disposal seemed to be the right approach. But also, I was curious because I was completely blown away by how visceral and how personal George Floyd's death felt for me. It felt like he was my brother, my father, my like a member of, it was like a member of my family was being murdered in the middle of the street. And it was like this forest fire, this wildfire of like, where is this coming from? I didn't know where it was coming from. And so when I understood, Resma's work about the ancestral trauma that gets embedded in us, I realized that it was the fury and the grief of my ancestors, of all the women in my lineage who were not able to save their loved ones from this violently oppressive system that we're moving in. And so I got really curious about how to deal with it in myself. And once I figured it out for myself, I wanted to share it with as many people as possible, because I too read all those books, but it didn't do anything about the way my body responds to racialized oppression and trauma and the repeated assault of Black people being murdered by police that the media keeps feeding us a steady diet of.
So how do you think the work that we do on ourselves in this way, like if someone was like, yes, sign me up for that, I'm going to go read My Grandmother's Hands, or I'm going to hire Lettie or someone else to do that kind of somatic therapy kind of work, how do you see that rippling out beyond themselves?
Well, it's because we are actively creating a new culture now. Like, that's what's happening. We are actively creating a new culture while the old structures are crumbling, right? So you got to think, all of our institutions that were founded in the last couple hundred years were built on the backs of broken bodies, broken spirits, land, stolen land, all of these abuses of power. And now they're corroding and rotting from the inside. And all of the institutional trust that we had as kind of a shorthand are thrown out the window. I mean, oh my God, even all the way down to the post office. The post office used to be the most automatic thing. It was like the one institution that nobody even had to think about. And even that, you know, is all rotted out, and we've got to figure out how we're going to even do that thing anymore. But it extends to our healthcare system, our education system, our law enforcement system, our judicial system, our government, you know, all across the board. These things that have had hundreds of years of investment, buy-in, and resources, and generations of people that just accepted them whole cloth. Now each individual person is tasked with questioning what is still true for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I guarantee you, if you're still blindly following things and trusting that things are being handled well, there's a lot of rude awakenings. A lot of rude awakenings. So any anti-racist work that you do, first of all, systemic oppression and the suffering of that impacts everybody. Even if it's not right in your face, even if you don't live in existence that makes you a direct target of the oppression, there's still someone in your network that's suffering. Someone that can't show up for you because they're compromised by the impact of these systems that are not, they're not life fulfilling, they're not life affirming. And so the imperative to do your decolonizing work is to heal yourself so that you can then in your own unique signature contribute to a culture of healing. Like that's what's on at the top, at the forefront right now, is that we are coming out of an almost 18-month, or I think it's 14 months now or something like that, but we're in this pandemic, the tail end of this pandemic, this particular one. Now they want to scare the heck out of us with other ones, but
Yeah.
you know what are the learnings that we've had, because this pandemic created the opportunity for so many of us to deeply reflect about our lives and how we want to go forward. And so that's why this is a good time to do the work, because many of us are restructuring, retooling, re reorienting ourselves for what's next, what comes after all of the adversity that we've had. But also, there's been this range of effect on us as individuals of this pandemic. People that have lost jobs, lost businesses, lost homes, lost loved ones. So that's why.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember in our first conversation, one of the things that really lit me up about the way you talk about this work is when you're able to actually make changes within your body, you're able to suddenly use your body as this, I don't know, instrument for tuning into truth and not truth. Because that's something I definitely
Yes.
struggle with. And like, I know so many struggle with it, and like fake news and like all the different distractions and all the different things, and that being, I mean, that's such a major tool that we can have.
Yes, yes. I mean, because we're living in a part of mainstream society is this cat and mouse game of what's really true and the acceptance of so many unacceptable things. Sometimes just for the sake of argument. Like something can be completely outlandishly, obviously untrue, but for the sake of argument, or to play devil's advocate, kind of thing. And it's those caveats that can spin us into doubt, like, oh, I never thought about that, kind of thing. But when you are socialized to look outside of yourself for the answers, and then you look around for the answers and either nobody knows
Mm-hmm.
or you don't trust the sources, then what else is there to rely on? And the truth of the matter is that that's when you have to be able to rely on yourself to a certain extent. But then many of us don't trust ourselves.
Mm.
We don't listen to ourselves, when our body is, for example, clearly screaming that we need to lay down and rest, but we don't do it
Yeah.
because some other conversation going on that prevents us from doing what our body clearly needs.
Mm-hmm.
So it all comes back to our relationship with ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
that we've got to heal our relationship with ourselves, and then that ripples out into the world.
I'm wondering how long you think that can take for someone. What was coming into my head when you were saying that is because I I don't think drinking coffee is great for me for like various reasons, and I still drink coffee. And I'm thinking like for someone who's drank coffee for the last 10 years and they stop drinking coffee, their body's telling like their mind is interpreting their body signal as like, no, you should drink coffee. When really there kind of needs to be this detox period for them to get to the other side of it. And I'm kind of imagining other body detoxing of body processes and detoxing of trauma kind of has a window like that too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, um I would say that what one person needs to, to get there depends on the level of trauma that needs to be healed. Obviously, it's a lot easier if you are not actively dealing with the aftermath of, let's say, an abusive relationship or a catastrophic injury or an illness, or if you're not actively in a relationship with someone who is abusive or codependent or who actively sabotages you, you know, like you say you want to eat healthy, but then your partner wants to order pizza and ice cream, and you know, like if you have to, you know, so it's like if you're trying to do something for yourself but you have outside forces, then yeah, it's gonna be challenging, right? It's gonna take a while. You're probably gonna have to lose some people. You're gonna have to get scarce and not be available until you can recenter yourself in the new paradigm. Because that's the thing, when you're trying to do your healing work, when you're doing your personal growth work, when you're sharpening the saw and, you know, honing the skills that you have, or having a deeper mastery of your craft, whatever that might be. It takes however long it's going to take for you. And if you've never had the experience of overcoming adversity, then, you know, you've got to get your bearings with that. There's always a lot of failures before you see any success. And what's your tolerance level? What's your tolerance for discomfort? What's your tolerance for not knowing? I know some people who can't not know. They need some kind of answer, some kind of confirmation. But if you're willing to be with the unknown, if you're willing to completely surrender into the process, you actually have an easier go at establishing new patterns, new routines, new ways of being and thinking and speaking in the world, when you can actually just not know and continue to navigate until you actually land at your destination.
I think we just lost 75% of the people at the idea of having to go to the unknown. I mean,
I know.
many of us like just numb out instead of that.
Exactly. That is that, but that's the key though, because we're living inside of a field of energy, you know. Who wrote that book called The Field? I think it was Lynn McTaggart, wrote a book called The Field, and she talks about, but it's also the quantum field, right? But you know, you can also call it oneness. You can also call it God if you want, but you don't have to. But we're connected with this energy and this intelligence. I like Deepak Chopra's definition. He calls it the field of pure potentiality.
Yeah.
Right? And so all of the energy, all of the information is in that field. But if you're so narrowly focused on one way, you're missing all of the other ways it can show up.
Yeah.
And so it requires, you have to build the tolerance for it. You know, just like most people, most humans can't just go from square one and just go run a marathon and go run 26 miles. There's a training process that you have to do. And this is why it's so important to have guides, coaches, mentors, you know, masterminds, affinity groups, and all these different things that can, you know, be benchmarks, people that are holding the vision for you so that you can incrementally progress on your journey of healing. But our society is set up in such a way that it's always showing the pinnacle. It's always showing the finished result, the finished product, and it misses the whole, everything that it took to get there. You know, you see a magnificent ballerina, but you don't see all the calluses on her feet. Have you ever seen a ballerina's feet? Oh my God.
It's scary. You're like, this is probably a form of torture.
You know, so it's like, yeah, you see that thing like, oh, but you don't see all that like, ooh.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's that icky stuff that gets you to the pinnacle. That's why, you know, sometimes people get to they scrap and claw and they step on people and they abuse and misuse and they fight their way to the top, and then they get there and it's like, what? That's it?
Mm,
kind of thing. And it was just
yeah.
like, yeah, because you were supposed to actually love your way up there. But instead, you've left a trail of broken bodies behind you, wondering why you feel so crappy once you finally achieve your goal, because you don't have anybody there to share you with, to reflect your light back to you,
Mm,
right?
mm. So if someone is like, well, I'm going to put a pause on this because I have a lot to deal with, and the idea of going into that unknown, I'm not so sure about that. Can we make a case for like selfish benefits of why you want to do this work?
Yeah, well, the thing, the fine print of transformational work, personal growth work, is that, look, if you don't confront it, it's gonna come at you sideways.
Yeah.
It's gonna jump out and embarrass you at the worst possible time.
Mm-hmm.
So a wise person would be preemptive and say, you know, I just left that bad relationship and jumped right into another one, and I know that I'm starting to have the same thoughts about this person that I had about that person. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's them, I think it's me.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't know what it is about you that keeps creating the same stuff over and over again. That's the unknown. That's the part that's intimidating. But that's exactly where you need to go if you actually want to have harmony, peace, love, fulfillment, happiness in your relationship. You've got to go clear all the junk out of the closet there.
Mm-hmm. I think there's also going to be like a new wave of business that people can be at the forefront of, you know, like people who
Yeah.
like do the work and they like tune into whatever next level consciousness that they're supposed to tune into by by abolishing trauma and abolishment in their body, and like suddenly you can speak to a different energy realm of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And because, one of the interesting things, I read an article recently that was saying that during the pandemic, people became a lot more open to broader spiritual concepts. I think with all the time we had on our hands, there are so many people going down different rabbit holes uh, to their benefit and or detriment. We know some people went into some dark abyssal areas and never came back out. I've lost a few friends. I'm like, what happened to so and so? Oh, Q got him. It's like, rest in peace, my friend.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had I haven't been able to fact check this, but a friend was like, "Oh my gosh, someone just sent me that there's three industries that are not are recession proof industries: alcohol. I think the second was like gambling, and then the third one was spirituality and religion. Like
Huh.
recession
Not.
proof industries, and I believe that because like 2020 woke so many people up.
Yeah.
Like you saw that meme of like the little girl holding the other little girl's hair, like throwing up into the toilet, and the one is like people who woke up in 2012. Like the people throwing up in the toilet is like people who woke up in 2012 or waking up in
I
2020.
would love to see that. That is so true. Like
Yeah.
I definitely was one of those people who popped. I popped in '06
Mm,
with Secret, and I would say that I probably had a few episodes along the way that were precursors to what was to come. But it was in 2007 that I got wind of 2012, and I was like, "Oh, I need to get ready for that." So I kind of started, and then 2012 happened, and it was like, wah wah wah.
uh-oh. What
Like,
happened?
well, what happened? It was supposed to be the end of the world. It didn't
Oh,
happen.
okay. Let
Um,
down.
Total letdown. And
Y2K.
here's the thing. and that's so funny because I had graduated college by then. I'm dating myself. But I worked in tech support, and so Y2K was my first job, like
Oh,
preparing. It was like 1999, like working on computers with people freaking out that when the time date changed over to 00, it was gonna revert everything back to the 1900s or crash or whatever. And it was like literally my grandma like stacked up all the food and toilet paper in the basement
my
for
parents
why.
did too. They got they're like not into stuff like that at all, but they bought water jugs.
Yeah, we were all very convinced that something was going to happen that didn't happen.
There's so
And
much hype that, like, I mean, like, I guess it would be, it's like toilet paper in 2020. There's so much hype that
I still got a case of pan toilet paper. It was the only one I could get. It's the Scott kind, which is like just like wiping with notebook paper or something. It's
dark.
terrible. Um, But yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, getting into the ascension consciousness, understanding that humanity was in this process of a deep evolution, that there was going to be large, huge systemic changes happening across all institutions and industries. We were all talking about that. We had no idea it was going to look like this, but I was so grateful that over the years I had accumulated enough knowledge to be able to go dig in my tool bag and find something that would help calm me down when the world felt like it was falling apart.
What's in your tool bag?
Ooh, um, non-attachment is
Mm,
a good one. Not being just that not being attached to any one particular philosophy, source of information. You know what I mean? Like I was just kind of like everything became unknown,
mhm.
right? So I had to kind of pull back and say, well, I don't know. I absolutely don't know, and I don't think you know, and you don't know, and you don't know either. So being in that space of non-attachment again kind of lets the unknown just be what it is,
Mhm.
without the impulse and the urge, sometimes uncontrollable urge to know. Because with 2020 in the beginning, nobody knew.
Mhm.
Nobody knew how the virus really spread. Nobody, the people were making these graphics of it, flying through. I didn't want to. I tuned out a lot of other people's information. So it's actually, I know some people don't have a tolerance for that, but I had to just cut the attachments to CNN. I stopped watching the news completely
Yeah.
because it would just wig out my nervous system.
Mm,
And we have to really, part of the somatic abolitionism is coming into deep relationship, right relationship with our parasympathetic nervous system, to be on guard for that fight, flight, freeze, you
mhm.
know hijacking that happens when energy and information comes our way that makes us feel unsafe.
Mhm.
And it could be anything. It could be the most mundane things that are triggering you, and you have to become aware of those triggers and then deactivate them.
Mm. Can you give some examples of triggers?
Um, this is probably a common one when a loved one or someone says, "We need to sit down and have a talk."
Ugh.
See, look at you. You're like, trigger warning. Um,
That's actually something when stuff like that happens, I like immediately am like, okay, let me try and think of all the positive ways. What are all the positive outcomes here? Because my brain I mean, all of our brains automatically goes to like,
the
what?
worst thing. Yeah.
Anyways, more
So
triggers.
I know, right? That's an easy one. Um, another a trigger for me is like when I reach out to someone and I don't hear back,
Mm,
and it's like, are they okay?
Mm.
Oh, what's going on? Are they just not talking to me? Did I do something wrong? You know, kind of thing. Um, and so, yeah, just being in that void of, are they ghosting me? Are they something happening? You know, that kind of thing. So that used to really kind of take me out,
Mm.
because then as soon as I gave it up, then the person would call and be like, "Oh my God, I lost my phone and I had to do this, kind of thing." And so, so letting your imagination hijack you when something happens that you don't expect. What's another trigger? Let me see. It's so funny. I don't get triggered as often, so I have to kind of go into the past and see. Um, I used to get triggered by people being late,
Mm.
like those different little pet peeves, like the things that just drive you nuts are triggers. Whether that's um, so for me, tardiness, like especially if you're coming to pick me up, like me and my husband had this thing. If he's supposed to pick me up and he's late and he doesn't communicate that he's late and I'm standing around, the more I'm standing around waiting, the more the thermostat, is going
Mhm.
higher and higher. But I've gotten better about that. And texting helps.
What
um
about little things like a notification coming up on your phone?
well, I turned off almost all of my notifications. So no,
Because of that? I'm not
I'm
asking about you. I'm talking about in general.
one of those freaks. But yeah, notifications can be very triggering, which is why I turn them all off.
Hmm.
Um, because it takes you out of your present time consciousness, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Hmm.
kind of thing, and that start and stop thing can be very.
Did you read Deep Work?
Ooh, work. Who wrote that?
Cal Norfolk? Nor Something with an N, I think. It's a great book. It talks a lot about like the psychology and science behind why you want to have deep work, where undistracted work for lengths of time, and it's a good one.
Yes. Good. Yeah, thanks for putting that out there. Yeah, we in a lot of ways we have to be retrained on how to focus because
Mm-hmm.
we're living in times that are unusual, and that our smartphone culture is in its, I wouldn't say it's its infancy, because the first smartphones came out in 2006. But we haven't had them all that long, and so the ways over the last 15 years that our phones have become so enmeshed in our lives,
Yeah.
um we actually need to figure out how to manage that. The fact that the software and the apps on the phone are designed to
Yeah.
hijack your attention, to take you and hold you.
Hmm.
Like they use science to figure out how to tap into that part of the brain that's for the highest good of them as
They're
developers and their
using
bottom
gambling. They're using gambling psychology, actually.
line.
Have you heard that?
Yes, gambling psychology.
Like
It's
they
so
don't show you when notifications actually happen. They'll like sometimes show you notifications and sometimes not, because it's playing with the you sometimes get a reward, but you sometimes don't get a reward, and you don't know when you're going to get a reward. So you have to keep playing.
yeah, yeah, and it's so manipulative.
Hmm.
And so we need all the help we can get
Hmm.
to retrain ourselves to be able to cut it off when we need to disengage.
So what do you feel like it is irresponsible to not watch the news?
No, because anything that you need to know, you're going to find out.
Hmm.
Somebody's going to tell you. I
Yeah.
mean, my 70 something year old mother in law lives with us.
Mm-hmm.
And she watches the news at 11 and at 5 and 6 and at 10 at night. Like, she watches the news when it comes on. And I gotta tell you, it is a lot of stuff that I don't need to know.
Yeah.
When there is something that is necessary to know, it shows up. It'll show up in a feed, or somebody will say, "Hey, did you hear about blah blah blah, whatever?" And then I'll go and look for it. So I choose to um, seek out the news very deliberately and then disengage.
Mm-hmm. Because I feel anxiety in my body often. So like I have different habits to manage that, or like and I spend a lot of time on the screen because all of my business is online, like all of us these days, really. And so I don't watch the news unless my husband happens to come home and like plays it on the TV. And I am very conscious of like I check Instagram or whatever like once or twice a day, and like it's not something that's notifying me on my phone. And I'm sometimes out of the loop on things, and I'm like, is this an irresponsible action? So that's why I was asking.
No, like really, if you need to know, somebody's gonna tell you.
Mm-hmm.
It'll pop up.
Mm-hmm. So something I really was excited to ask you is what responsibility you think we have as business owners to be change makers?
Yes. Well, I mean, what's really great about being an entrepreneur, I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years. I started my business as a professional organizer and life coach. And so when I started clearing clutter for people, it only took maybe a year or two before I realized that this is more than just the junk here.
Mm-hmm.
There's something happening with the people that's creating the chaos in the environment. I need to get really curious about that piece. Otherwise, people are going to think I'm the cleaning lady and they're going to call me every month. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do this one time and get this place in order. And then you hire somebody to come clean, keep it clean for you. But don't have me come in and declutter your place and then you just kind of go through and knock everything down again or whatever, because whatever caused the clutter in the first place was never addressed or dealt with.
Your pricing
And
was clearly too low if they were trying to get you to come in every month.
oh my God, that's a whole other story about valuing your services, right? But the great thing that business owners do is that you can meet the needs that you see arising in ever more creative ways. And so when we look at what's happening in our collective, there's such a huge breakdown in sense making, just our ability to make sense of the world, to do the kind of critical thinking necessary to make the right decisions for ourselves, for our businesses, for our clients. And so, there's a huge kind of opening for innovation right now, and innovation is where small business owners and solopreneurs thrive,
Yeah.
because you can move like a speedboat, whereas large corporations are like cruise ships.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Barack Obama that was using this analogy of the cruise ship versus the speedboat. It's like you think you can turn the economy a certain way, but the economy is gonna it's gonna
Yeah.
move so slowly and incrementally, whereas those smaller entities can just make that turn the way you need to. And I've watched so many colleagues thrive in this pandemic by being able to take the necessary steps to get online and figure things out, and now they're more profitable in the online space than they were when they were anchored in just the physical 3D work. So, that's what I would say. It's like you have the ability to change on a dime and be able to really meet and resolve issues at their root.
Mm-hmm. But do you think we're responsible it should be a responsibility of ours?
If you want to be in business for the long haul, I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, look, and look, there are people that build businesses with the intention to sell them, give them away, and
Yeah.
do some other thing, right? So if you're planning to be one of those established businesses that you're going to carry this on as some sort of a legacy or something, then yeah, you should take that on as a responsibility, because it's going to continue to give you weight and gravity and credibility and character and things that make people want to do business with you, that makes their nervous system trust you
Mm,
instinctively, like that animal part of us where we know the difference between a predator or
mm,
person with a predatory consciousness versus an altruistic person who's open and generous. We know that in the animal part of ourselves. And so we have to remember that we are always transmitting our energy, whether we're speaking it directly or not. And so people know if you're flaky, if you're
mhm,
ungrounded,
mm.
if you're actually biting off more than you can chew and you're over promising and that you're going to under deliver. They might say no because it doesn't feel right, but ultimately who you are and how grounded and established you are and your responsibility, your integrity, your truth, and how you want to show up, it transmits in the field.
Yeah. And I mean, what an amazing vision for all of us to be able to step into of we through this work that we can do with ourselves. Like in the first, like I want to ask you what the first steps people can take today, but like even first steps of just starting to embody yourself and reading a few books as like simple first steps. It's something that can change you on such a fundamental level that it changes the way you speak, it changes the decisions you're going to make, it changes what you transmit. So suddenly, like, and if all of us can do that, if a percentage of us can do that, how is that actually going to change everything?
Yeah, that's what's beautiful. I think it was Malcolm Gladwell who talked about the tipping point, right?
Mm,
Where there's once it gets to a certain number of people, the momentum is necessary for it to just grow and build up a life of its own, and all those neutral standby people get caught up in the most dominant energy frequency. And so, it only takes a certain number of people to really create the trend that is going to then cause the cascading effect.
mhm.
So sometimes we can get overwhelmed by the hugeness of the problem. I
Yeah.
mean, now anti-racism, we're we're in some of the same types of energy within our society that we were prior to the Civil War.
Mm,
And I've come across an article that talked about how the fact we're kind of in a cold civil war here in the US, where there is just a big chunk of people who are holding a completely different point of view about how things should be done. And it seems so polarized.
yeah.
And it seems like, how in the world are we going to do this without blowing each other up to bits, in some kind of way, right? Getting super violent and having a huge breakdown in that way. But what gives me hope, what gives me um, some sense of calm, is how many people are doing deep spiritual healing work on themselves.
Mhm.
Like, how many people were able to receive therapy during the pandemic because the therapy the profession approved online sessions,
Mm,
because I we had a therapist supporting us as a family here, and it would be so I live in Chicago, and sometimes the weather would be so bad, and we'd be like, gosh, can we just have the session over the phone? And it was against regulations and rules.
oh, wow.
Yeah, and so the pandemic was able to open up therapy in an online setting for so many people. I talked to a psychotherapist who's in Maryland, and she's like, I don't actually want to go back to in-person sessions. Like, I want to keep it this way. So, there have been so many people that are healing on a very deep level. There are so many people that are um, connecting around the world in ever wider circles and groups of people, and cross-pollinating and sharing ideas and information, and being, coming into coherence about what we need to do. And like I said, you get the right percentage of those people, and it'll just the ripple will become a wave.
Mm. Do you have a mission as as a business owner? Like, do you have a mission around behind your business of like what your work you kind of see rippling out into the world?
Yeah. I feel as though I'm someone who is holding a pillar,
Mm,
or I feel like a lighthouse.
mm,
And with lighthouses, they're all over. And they are there to hold steady, to say, we're here, like, this is here, come this way, this is where the land is.
mm.
So as boats are out and they're trying to figure out where land is, they can find that light, that one light. And I feel as though I'm that one light that is, shining into the darkness to say, come this way. And so, whatever it is, if you want harmony in your home environment, come this way, I can show you, right? If you want to metabolize your ancestral inheritance of, systemic oppression in whatever ways it showed up, then I've got some light over here. You can come this way, right? So I tend to do transition coaching. I help people that are in the midst of any type of transition. And so if you're in the middle of a transition, I can help you get to the other side.
Go that way.
Play.
Oh, well, okay. Before I ask you all of your links to all the places, I'm curious, what are first steps that people can start taking today or this month to get on this journey?
Mm. Well, other than, read my grandmother's hands, if you haven't already. Um,
Well, you actually recommended for us to listen to that, yeah?
yeah, yeah.
Instead of read.
I like the audiobook because he puts exercises in there for you to tap into your body to find that antidote to the limbic hijacking that happens when that fight, flight, or freeze response gets triggered. So instead of, it says put the book down and do this exercise. If you're listening to the audiobook, you can actually just let the narrator
Mhm.
guide you through. So that's one step, because again, it does not matter what culture, it doesn't matter how much melanin is in your skin or not. We have all been impacted by colonization, white supremacy, and systemic oppression. It it's like a chimera. It changes, shape shifts over and over in all these different ways. It has all these tentacles, and we've all been swimming in these toxic waters. And so we have to detox. We have to clear ourselves. We have to find all the places within us that have gone untended to, and tend to those wounds, tend to the residue of the traumas. Um, the other thing I would say is, honestly, breath work it's so fundamental, but you'd be amazed when you start paying attention to your breath, how often are you barely sipping in any oxygen.
Mhm.
Sometimes we breathe so shallow, and it keeps us right on the edge of anxiousness, or right smack dab in the middle of being anxious when you're
Mhm.
breathing so shallowly. And so I'm a big fan of vagal breathing It's, you know, a short inhale, a long exhale, and hold. There are videos on YouTube and things like that. Get really intimately acquainted with your vagus nerve.
Mm.
Find out what it is, where it's at, how it works, and how you can be in right relationship with it, because it is such a key to dealing with anxiety,
Oh, now she's
dealing
talking to me, you guys.
yeah, anxiety, panic attacks, you know, that cloudy brain that happens when you don't know what to do because you're so overwhelmed because there's just too much going on. You'd be amazed at the power of your breath. It's so simple, but it's not easy. And it takes some development, it takes some reps. You've got to get your reps in. And so I recommend a morning practice. And I actually hold a morning practice in my Mighty Networks community.
Okay, so tell us how people can go deeper with you on that note. Where are all the places? How can they give you money? How can...
Um, so so I'm on all of the things as a goddess ministry. So that is Facebook, Instagram, everything is goddess ministry. I do have Twitter, but I don't tweet anything. So you'll find me on Goddess Ministry, but haven't posted in years. Um, I have a community on Mighty Networks. It is the Goddess Ministry. It is free to join. And within that, I have my monthly gatherings called Eclipsing Injustice. Eclipsing Injustice does have its own Facebook page, but Eclipsing Injustice is my somatic abolitionist space. On the new moon and the full moon, we get together and hold sacred ritual space to heal ourselves and the collective of the accumulated wounds of systemic oppression, and to have deep, impactful conversations for how we build a just and equitable global society.
And do you do coaching, or is that other ways to work with you? Yeah.
Yeah. So I do, again, transitional coaching. So if you step into a coaching agreement with me, I'll take you on for 28 days, 40 days, or 90 days, usually at a time. I think you guys did 28 days with me, right? Yeah, and so we can talk about that. I also do coaching sessions for groups like we did. And so group sessions, solo sessions. I'm in the process of creating a course and a program, and those things take time, and videos and editing and all that stuff. But yes, so that's basically how you can work with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lettie. This was such an amazing conversation, and I so appreciate your experience and your wisdom and just sharing with us today.
Thank you so much. Yes, I like to say that the approach that I use for anti-racism work is focused on our hearts, because there's something so heartbreaking about all of this.
Mhm.
And you start from the center and work your way out, it's more sustainable than a top down, fill my head with a bunch of information and then it gets stuck. So if you start from the center out,
Mm.
it's more sustainable, and it allows you to cultivate a consciousness that creates culture.
Mm. So beautiful. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Go follow Goddess Ministry on Instagram to stay updated with Lettie. And you all have an amazing week.